Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have from the great Midwest of Milwaukee, millennial man. No, he's not millennial. Dr. V. But right now, we're going to be talking about our Extreme TV kind of sublet here on the Extreme Movie Show because we do talk a little bit of TV. We have something special. It's Jack Reacher, the Amazon Prime show that just dropped about a week ago. It's based off Lee Child's Jack Reacher character that's been in about 20, 22, 23 books or so. I read about the first 20. Of course, we're going to be talking a little bit about how the TV show compares to the Tom Cruise 2012 movie, because most people don't even think about the second one, and the physicality of it, and a lot of other things too. But generally, Doctor, I would say, having read most of the books myself, the TV show here on Prime, it really does feel like it's the book, because I will say this, it's a very simple formula in the books. Reacher goes somewhere, something happens, he inadvertently gets involved in something typically. We kind of think we have a baseline on what it is. We get him doing the detective thing in his head, being kind of smart, which is always a neat thing. But then there's some layers that we don't get used to, and then it really plays out in the very long third act, which involves a lot of traveling. And along the way, he drinks a lot of coffee and beats a lot of people up. So when this show came on, the main problem I had was this. I thought that the guy in it, the actor, we'll get to in a moment how he looks like physically. I felt like the way it was shot, we talk about great trailers versus bad trailers. I felt like he was almost smirking, like he was being, like it was a cute trailer. And when you watch the show, you go, I'd rather watched a bit more of a trailer that didn't come across as kind of cutesy, because it looked like just the way it was shot. They were putting in all the nice cutesy joke lines. And this show is not like it. There's a lot of gore, to use it the term bluntly, a lot of violence. And it's a hell of a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. I'm excited for the second season. I'm surprised to say that. But you and I had our eye on this for a little bit too. So tell me, what attracted you to want to see Jack Reacher? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, to be honest, I never watched a trailer. I don't watch trailers. I knew the guy from watching Titans do a review over on the Kiki Puppet Show with Puppet Team over there.
Yes.
And well, this is the actor. This is the guy who originally played Aquaman. This is Alan Richardson. His character in this kind of remind me of his character Hawk in that comic book show. Kind of dark and gritty, and always getting into fights. So when there's a scene in this show where he gets sent to prison, to spend a night in lockup and all, and he gets in a fight, and the way he fights, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is almost the same choreography they had over there. A little different, but yeah, there's a little gore. There's eye getting gouged out and stuff, the thumb, the eye. Yeah, going into this.
The thumb to the eye.
Yeah, right. Ouch. I can't look at it. No, I was surprised to see who the cast was in here. So I said, you got Malcolm Goodwin, who plays Finley here, Detective Finley. He's best known from iZombie, at least to me is, which is a CW show. He was a cop on there. And then you have Bruce McGill. Bruce McGill is a good popular actor as well. He's been in a few different movies over the years. He's actually, for those who remember us doing a review of the movie Time Cop, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
JCVD. Yeah.
Miguel was the police chief. He was in charge of the program. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you got some notable faces here too. You also got Kristen Crook, who played Lana Lang on Smallville, which show which also had Alan Richardson on for a couple seasons. As I said, he was Aquaman on there, Arthur Curry. So it was nice to see those two small little alumni being back together on the cast together. And I gotta say, from seeing these people in the different shows, wow. Especially was different was seeing Oscar Finley, aka Malcolm Goodwin's character. He was a little bit more reserved than he was kind of on. I want to say on iZombie. iZombie was a comedy / detective show, and he was working with a girl in a morgue, who could basically eat a zombie and she'd get permissions of how the person died, and he was kind of straight faced in there. He was kind of a dick in this though. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like wow, they really it's a totally different version I've seen, because he was more of a nice guy in the show, but in this show he's Malcolm Goodwin plays Finley, and he doesn't like Reacher. He doesn't like people talking to him. He's a black guy in a small town where his only other black guy is the barber, Willie. Willie C. Carpenter's the actor. Mosley is the name. But Kristen Crook in here plays. She plays Hubbles. This guy who's involved with the what's the name? Embezzlement. I think it's called, or money laundering. Money laundering. She plays the wife, and dude, she plays a really serious character in here. So it's nice to see people playing different roles than they're normally cast as. Alan Richardson still plays Reacher, and he's still got that kind of the Tom Cruise kind of a smirk. I noticed that. Even though it's not really like, it's like where he's a jerk. Tom Cruise, people know him outside of it. So when you see a smirk, you're like, oh, that freaking son of a bitch, I hate him. No, Alan Richardson kind of mimicked it a little bit, but knowing his character in the show, I thought it was, I've never read the book, but now I'm kind of curious to read the book because he really, because I don't want to ramble on too much, but I'll just say this, my last point. Alan Richardson is 6'2", and he's like super like in shape and stuff, versus the Tom Cruise version we had in 2012. So I was like, when I first heard he was in there, I was like, really? He left Titans to go to this show? I'm like, oh, this is gonna be bad and stuff. I was proved wrong. Insert foot in the mouth. Because I'm like, well, 6'2" guys, this is like gonna have another John Cena Peacemaker show. Except it's gonna be serious. And wow, it actually like turned out to be one of the best shows that came out this year, I'd say.
Well, you say insert foot in mouth. I think based off the reaction on Twitter and when I see the reviews, a lot of men, women, no matter what your sexual persuasion is, would want something else inserted in your mouth of Alan. Because I got to tell you, as a happily married heterosexual male myself, one of the things that with Tom Cruise and Alan Richardson, the contrast here is obviously we know Tom Cruise is not necessarily the biggest physical individual of all time, right? I think Tom Cruise did an exceptional job of capturing the spirit of Reacher and the intelligence and everything else there too. Tom, of course, doesn't come across as a meathead. So in a way, you could argue that, especially the first Reacher movie, which had some great scenes, but didn't really get a lot of support, when it was released or pub or whatever. I didn't even know what it was when it was out. And I'm like, it's Tom Cruise. It's not getting any pub. It's getting less pub than night and day. Are you kidding me? But he nailed it. And I think of the bar scene in the movie. And I think of Cruise just putting pieces together. I thought, this is neat. This kind of reminds me of here on the Extreme Movie Show when Professor Brooks and I are, review the James Bond movies. I like to see the detective stuff. I like to see them piecing stuff together. Mm-hmm. And one of the neat things about the books, which I thought we saw a lot of it here in the show, is this: you don't see a lot of what the bad guy is. It's not like Hitchcock where there's a bomb under the table and you're trying to see if they can figure it out or not, and you're squirming as an audience. It's not like it. You're along with the ride. So let me circle back to Alan Richardson here, because what's important with the difference here is Tom Cruise, I thought, did a fine job. The book people were pissy, like book people always are, about how the way things get translated. Book people can't really be too pissy about this one, in my opinion. There's a few slight changes, nothing major, in my opinion, that took away from the enjoyment of that. And you're right. He's 6'2". I read that he put on about 35 pounds for this, which means if he said he was 6'2", 225, 235, he's probably about 195, 200 walking around. That's a man. My daddy always said, you got to be 6 foot tall and 200 pounds and you're a man. Otherwise, you're a boy, and he looks the part. And of course, I've always felt that you shouldn't be ashamed of the human body. And in the 80s, we always joke about with slasher films that we get a lot of the cheap TNA stuff going on, and that was the thing, and people don't do that much. But the reverse is also true. If you're a guy and you got something that looks good, flaunt it, show it. There's nothing wrong with it. Be a beefcake, because this guy, I'll just say this: all these terms apply. He's jacked, he's beefy, he's swole, he's juicy, he's ripped, he's on the gas, he's wherever you want to
12-pack.
Call it. He's got the dick root that's hanging out when he comes out, and the girls, obviously get wet in the panties when he says, I need to get some clothes or whatever. The guy's good looking. He's a friggin' hunk. He's a fine piece of meat. He's an excellent specimen. So no homo. The bottom line is he fits the role. And you know what? When you do something like this, where you take a book and you extend it out for 8 hours, that's kind of tough to do without making it seem like filler. You've got to nail at least the character, because that's the number one complaint. Otherwise, everyone would have flipped off the screen and said, "Screw it." And I knew he was a decent looking guy and with some decent size, TV wise, because he was on a sci-fi show called Blood Drive for one season that
Yep.
I watched. There was some model, it was kind of quirky, but to be that naturally, big and then run a cycle, let's say, and put on 30 pounds, the guy looks at it, he shows it, should not be embarrassed at all. He nailed the role physically. I'm really proud to see it because one big complaint you and I have is the lack of the charisma part, even with guys that aren't that big, like Jackie Chan. We talk about, and we talk about Chuck Norris and JCVD that might have been 180 pounds. They've got the charisma, they've got a body and look. They're not huge guys, but this guy looks it, and the fight scenes are worth it too. We get plenty of that too. So
Yeah.
let's just talk a little bit about the action sequences and how good they are.
I want to say though, I said I hate to compare this kind of to like other shows like Peacemaker, but they're like this guy, the John Cena build. When you see him fighting against these other guys, I'm getting and we're seeing this also on Peacemaker as well with John Cena, power bombing and just like just throwing these little guys around. And I gotta say, it is entertaining as being a wrestling fan. Get to see little guys getting thrown. It just shows how it shows how much stronger he is. It just makes more believable that he was like in the military. He was a Marine and stuff. Where 5'7" Tom Cruise is just like, oh, okay, I guess he's just got the Black Widow thing going on where it's make believe,
Yeah,
where
exactly.
he has to rely on like cheap shots. Where Reacher is man, for me a guy. I guess he's a former investigator. I guess his job in the military was to hunt down people that deserted. And
he was an investigator in the military. Yep.
Yeah. So, but also that I love also they go back to show his childhood with him and his brother. When they were staying, I guess, in Hawaii with his parents. And I love showing the flashbacks. Another show that does as well is Peacemaker. So it's really interesting to see two big guys in different shows. Kind of similar, like directing as far as the show storytelling. Not only do you get this, they give you a small flashback of who the character is. They slow it up as each episode goes. You get to see who he is, who he was younger, what turned him into this, and it doesn't take away from the actual story, because the whole point is to find out, find out who killed his brother, and they also want to find out, well, why was this other guy's Hubble. This rich dude, the little pipsqueak, glasses. Why was his number in, his brother's shoe, and it's connected and all this stuff. And then you got, there's still, it's just mystery after mystery as you unfold it, and there's murders, and Reacher is just trying to basically understand what's going on, and who can you trust? Yeah, it's. I said, like, the action scenes are pretty good in this. They're believable. You got in a fight with Ann Richardson, the dude's gonna jack you up. It's he can defend himself, and then what's really cool is the fact that Reacher himself it is believable that he can tell who someone is, where they've been. He do psych profiles on them. It kind of gets me the person who I liked the movie Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. How he could calculate and figure out what's up and deduct stuff. And you kind of see that in real time too. Here, they don't slow mo they don't do slow motion like Disney did, or whatever it was company that directed those movies. But I love that you're getting a combination of like a Sherlock Holmes thing, but also a John Rambo, because that's what he reminds you of. He's a deserter.
You don't see people using their intelligence a lot in a lot of shows, especially action ones, which, this is how I would define this one here. And to your point, it's tough to see a big meathead like this guy who's very hunky and extremely just disgustingly good looking. More power to him. And he's a Florida boy too. So # Florida man.
Yeah.
But the hyper vigilance, once you have it, it's really hard to turn off. And, one of the, I think, most famous characters all the time, Sherlock Holmes. I think a lot of things get based off of that. And so to me, like I said at the beginning here, you really had to nail physically how it would look like. And it's not also because it's Hollywood how big he is. If he says he's 6'2", 235, let's say, in reality he might be 6'1", 205, right, or 215. But he looks every inch of 6'2", 6'3", 235 in certain scenes. And we know Hollywood can make you look taller and bigger and younger and all that stuff. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of impractical effects or CGI in here, except the last episode with fires and stuff, because that's what they do. But they there's a scene where he comes into town after this guy's been brutally murdered, and Reacher gets off the bus, which happens to be at the intersection where this person was murdered. And he starts walking, and of course they don't show you his face, they show you from like his feet up, and he's walking into town, he goes to eat or whatever, and right when he's getting ready to walk in this diner, it's like a lot of small towns or a lot of places when there's not a lot of eyes on you. You got some redneck white trash guy being all verbally abusive with his woman or whatever like that, and he looks like he's getting ready to backhand or whatever. And real life, it's hard to say, but I think most people would say the smart play is to ignore people's business. But then Reacher just stops, and this is our introduction to him. And the way they have it filmed, they do two things. One, they show him staring, unblinking for a moment at this guy until the guy basically does like what a dog would do when you stare at it and it submits. It growls a little bit, then it almost pisses his pants. The only thing this guy didn't do was roll over and show his belly. He's like, look, I'm sorry, I had a bad day. It's not going to happen or like that. But when we see a side shot while this is going on, you see the guy, and he's average height, probably 5'8", 5'9", maybe 150, 160. And then you see him with a little bit of a gap, kind of like it's a side view of a head-to-head. And you see how Reacher literally, Alan's the actor is about like a head taller than the guy. And like that is such a great little shot to put in here, because it does see how physically dominating he is. Because you can be somebody that weighs 180, 190 and be 5'8", 5'9", and you look kind of small and you're well proportioned, but you're thick, especially if it's in your thighs. And this guy, I'm not going to say he skipped leg day, but when you see it, he definitely made sure it was all up there, and all the deadlift exercise type of muscle groups, the shoulders, you could call him Trapzilla, for God's sakes. I mean, the guy's just got this huge thick neck thing going on, and his arms too. He's not just all bis or tris. He's got the total package there. So like I say, he's an elite level specimen, but they even show it when goes into jail because they didn't have cuffs to fit him. They put zip ties on him, and you just see him there flexing, and you're like, yeah, could you guys be any more obvious the way you're trying to film them? But you have to do that to establish the character. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good the supporting cast is that you mentioned and talked about, how experienced they are, or the writing, which to me was okay. I'm not going to say it's phenomenal, but it was fine. It doesn't matter how well it's shot or the music or anything else there. You've got to nail this early on, and they took the time and attention to establish that here in an episode. So I'm really glad they did, because without it, there's no way you have the opportunity to believe the rest of it. And it's what you and I have talked about with wrestling and other things before. If you don't like the character and can't root from them, nothing else almost matters, really, for the most part. So, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the story itself there. Jack finds himself, with the pipsqueak guy you mentioned going, well, he didn't kill this person, who we find out later was, Reacher's brother. And then, of course, this time it's personal. But what did you take of the fact that they did this in all 8 hours?
I actually didn't think about that being 8 hours. I mean,
but it is
8 episodes.
Usually a book is the 8 episodes is about 8 hours. So you took a book,
but it's not
instead of making it like two hours, you make it 8. I didn't think it really lost much or anything.
Well, I mean, it's not. I want to get people confused. The show does not takes more than over a couple days. It's 8. Each episode is 8 hours.
Right. It's an 8-hour watch for a book.
Yeah. For us, your binge watch for that. But I'm just saying, that's what's in. Not everybody thought this whole story takes place in 8 hours. No,
nobody knows that.
Yeah. No, I actually liked the fact that this show was done pretty well, and I was looking up the actual show was actually the book Killing Floor was written in 1997, because it really feels like a 90s, late 80s kind of like a vibe to it. Like I said, Jack Reacher, man, if he would have been in the 80s, he would have been an 80s star. I mean, you look at the way the similars are. He kind of, as far as the prison scene, that reminds you of Stallone, when lockup, and he gets jumped. You later on in the show, when he gets attacked by Hubble's house, so he goes Rambo, and does takes out bad guys one at a time. When this show, it's intellectual, but it's also it's a man show, but it's also for the ladies, it's
exactly
there's some feeling. So it touches all bases. Now, I would not let any kids watch this, because what happens to the victims is not a very
and it's
pleasant
super
sight, and they
violent.
show it. They
Yeah.
show the aftermath. They don't show what's going on, but they do show the aftermath, and there is some genitalia. I can tell you that much, and just that's the least of your worries when you see the bodies. But
Well, I think the
um,
thing about Lee Child, the author of these books, is obviously when the movie came out with Tom Cruise and the second one, I
mhm,
was like, okay, let me give these books a shot, right? So I started with the first one and read it, and a lot of older books, if they're really dense or they've got a lot of flowery language and 50-cent words in them, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna read a chapter and then you put it down. But the books are very digestible. They have the same kind of template that you and I always like, kind of like the hero's journey. You
yeah.
get somebody, you find out his character through his actions, not because of everything else. And here you've got a character that doesn't really change too much over the course of the books. He goes somewhere new basically every episode, finds himself getting involved in things. So it's cool that
Oh, yeah.
you have this sense of familiarity with it, because the interesting thing that makes it a page turn when you're reading these is that there's so much depth to it that goes on. And Lee Child himself, I believe, kind of in a way, I look at him as the Reacher role, because my understanding is that this is what he would do. He would go out for like a couple months during the time of a year here in the United States, and he would just kind of wander around and check things out. And eventually, at some point, that started clicking, and he would start writing, these books. And I think he just was one of those authors that got something that sounds very simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, and I think he got the template right, and he's not trying to
Yeah.
outsmart himself, or he's not trying to invent
Mhm.
the next wheel when it comes to writing. So it's a very good template, and they're not boring. I thought after 5 or 6 books, I'd be like, it's the same
Well,
shit. Why
I
would I bother reading it? But
I
there's
I
enough
got
differences with where he's going that it works.
I'm actually now that I never ever realized I was looking up. This actually book is the book takes place in first person point of view, Reacher's point of view, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's kind of new for me because I mean I'm at least not really new, but I mean I growing up we had to read those the books and stuff, Killing Mockingbird, not everything was in first person. You had your dialogue and that was it. It was kind of like a movie script. Um, Twilight was like that, and I think one other book I read. Oh yeah, Odd Thomas. So I'm actually gonna probably check out this book because I never I didn't read this book, but I really love the show. And Lee Childs is the guy who wrote this. Lee Child, he really loved everything they did with this. And obviously he's sad because what happens at the end with Reacher and stuff. And it's not going to carry over into the next book. Because the next season is going to be a different story. Now that this case is closed. If they solve everything at the end of the season. So I'm kind of excited to read this because when I read like first person stories, and if it's a good story, I just can't put the book down. I go to the next one. So if the book's just like the show, man, he won't see me for a while. But yeah, I really enjoyed this show more than I thought it would. Because this is a show like you like okay like oh yeah it's just another Amazon show. It's like okay whatever. It's like not because finding shows today in today's culture it's depending on what you like. And if you're really picky like it's few and far between when I find something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what because I treat the same way with movies as as TV as video games. There's been a lot of video games I played along back then. Now I hardly play video games. Same with movies. I hardly watch movies. I'm getting more into TV shows, getting more into reading some books. But yeah, this show just keeps you on edge, and you're trying to think, you're like, okay, like who's the bad guy? Like, well, okay, like this guy can't be the bad guy. That wouldn't make sense. It'd be too easy. Is it? Because there's so many dirty people in this show. It's like and like is it who's the main bad guy? Is it the mayor? Is it this little prick? Who rich boy who is
Yeah.
upset
Who's
that he
falling
can't
around?
have
Yeah.
it's and then you got the Deputy Baker in there who's kind of a dick too.
Hmm.
And it just you didn't know, and you're like, and then you're also like, wait, is Oscar Finley the guy who had an Alpha Reacher in the beginning? Is he part of all this? Or like, are they going to play like Roscoe, which is a really interesting thing. Roscoe is played by Will Fitzgerald. and her character is
Not
she's
to
a
be
deaf.
confused with Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Yeah, I know, right? They never really explained why her name was Roscoe, did they? Did they? I can't remember if they did or not. But her parents died in a car accident, and this other guy took care of her, and until he killed himself a year before our Reacher showed up. And she's from the very episode, she gives when Reacher's in lockup, she gives him a cup of coffee, and
nice
like she's actually kind of nice on him, and throughout the series those two kind of form a bond against Finlay's wishes, because Finlay's he's just a guy he's got a past, but he doesn't want to tell you about what's going on, and he's you can see him throughout the episode. You see him, he doesn't seem trustworthy, and like I said, and then what's Bruce Miguel is good in this, and so Curie Graham plays Kleiner. Kleiner Senior brought his company to this little town of Margrave, and you hear about how Roscoe, she says well, he ran all the family farms out of business. He comes in, this big guy, and everybody loves him because he saved the town from bankruptcy and stuff. And you're like, okay, well, this guy's obviously the bad guy, but like I said, it's his son is he's a loose cannon, a little junior. He's a psychopath, and there's just so many different red herrings. It's going to keep you guessing until you get to the very end. And this is a show I never thought, dude. I watched Jack Reacher, Tom Cruise, it's okay, whatever. Even though I did like him because it's Tom Cruise. I mean, because he has a way of making movies that aren't bad, and I thought Reacher was actually pretty good. Both Reachers actually, compared to what else is coming out, it's I guess you'd say those movies were kind of average, but it was interesting.
Everything else.
I think I cared more about the character than I cared more about an actual Tom Cruise playing the role. That's what drew me to it. But dude, Alan Richardson in here, that man is a sexy beast, I tell you. No homo. But the dude, for ladies, anybody listen to this, if you are a fan of seeing guys, if you watch Aquaman, you watched it, see him with his shirt off. You're gonna watch Reacher.
He's a man, he's not a boy.
You're gonna see Alan Richardson.
You're gonna watch his comic book heroes.
At least 4 times in the show, I think, at least 3 or 4, he takes his clothes off because he wants to get
a lot of ass in his show.
Oh my gosh. There is a little bit for like I said, this is a little violent. There is a little bit of topless nudity in here. There is a boob scene, but that's very short lived. I guess twice. There's 2 scenes probably, and there's a strip club too when they meet the informant. But oh my gosh, there's different cast of characters, everything. It's all around probably one of the. I'd say I'm gonna say right now, it's probably the best show. People go on about I love Peacemaker. This is what Peacemaker should have been. Serious, instead of being kooky and crazy. But I guess it works for that show because they're going with alien stuff, so they gotta keep it goofy. But this is man, this is my show. I really want the next season. I hope they do. Was there 3 books? 3 or 4 books?
22.
Really? Is there really that 20?
A book every year he wrote and released. Yes.
Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh.
No, I'm not. I think I've read the first 20 up through Blue Moon, and then there's been the last 2 or 3, depending on the COVID release dates or anything.
Well, okay. And this has 3. Apparently,
Cruise's movie was the 12th. Was I think the 12th or 13th book.
And the Killing Floor is what they're doing, right? This is the first. They're going off the Killing Floor.
Well, yeah, they went for the very first book. Now I don't know if that means the second one.
Apparently,
but they're not going to do 20. They're not going to do 20 seasons.
No. But this Killing Floor, the book itself, has 3 prequels to it: The Enemy, Night School, and The Affair. So, did any of those prequels go into the show?
No.
Okay.
No. It's starting from scratch, literally, without having Tom Cruise and doing it this way without doing movies. That's why they want to do it.
And you brought up the scene before, the bar scene with Tom Cruise, the diner scene where he gets put in handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Reacher here gets arrested in the diner scene, I believe, in the show. And they come up to him and they say like, yeah, you're arrested for murder. He's like, what? He goes in there, put in handcuffs. And I love it when he goes, they bring him into the jail cell, like I said, and like, when they finally want to bring him out, he's like, yeah, we checked out your alibi. Yeah, you didn't do anything. You were on the bus. There's no way you could have committed the murder. He's like, okay, so can I take these off? Because they zip tie him because they didn't have big enough handcuffs. They're like, yeah, I guess we'll get somebody to cut off. He's like, don't worry. He just pulls his wrist apart, breaks it, snaps it. Didn't that happen before with was that Stallone or was that Arnold that did that, snapped him? I know I've seen that before in an action movie before, an 80s thing.
I think Arnold.
Yeah.
I don't remember off the top
Commando,
of my head, yeah.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But like I said, that shows a test of his strength. He could just snap these are the thick, big zip ties, dude. These aren't the little baby ones. These are the ones they use. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just snapped them like they're nothing. Now, obviously, they probably cut them. We didn't see that, but they know just for because I don't think the actor could have really snapped them on his own. But maybe he can. I don't know. But yeah,
I've never heard you gush and spooge over a show ever. This is the first
how
for
many
me.
shows have you watched?
Full of shock and awe.
Dude, how many shows have you watched where it actually was this good? And then straight to the point where there's no bullshit.
Here's the concern I have, and bottom line, my final thoughts are: it's a great show. Go watch it. It's going to be awesome. You're going to enjoy it. Have a lot of fun with it. Be entertained. It's enjoyable. You're not going to come away pissy. It's not preachy. It's not PC. It's none of that kind of stuff. It's pure up, straight character, and it's a lot of fun. For me, to answer your question, my concern was, okay, are they going to do one of those things where they have a really great episode, or maybe by the second episode you're like, okay, I'm hooked. But then you get a few episodes in and you're like, okay, they're just stretching this shit out. It should have been 6 instead of 8 or whatever. And I think 8 worked perfectly. I don't know if that'll be that way for every single one they do, but to me, it worked out well. So I agree with you. The fact that it started off well, but it maintained its consistent quality all the way through up to the end, that was what was surprising to me, and it was still enjoyable. So I agree with you. It's one of the better shows I've seen in a long time. I'm pleasantly surprised here to start off 2022. And what final thoughts do you have, sir?
My final thoughts is what was the guy's name? Blake something? Blind Blake, right? The musician you want to go there for the Reacher one to go listen to? There's and actually is a real singer, jazz singer. So check out Blind Blake's music. Yeah. All
right, everybody, there you go. Jack Reacher Season 1 on Amazon Prime right now. Check it out. It is a great show. You will enjoy watching it. I promise you that. For all listeners here at the Xtreme Movie Show, it's fantastic. We don't do a lot of TV, but we do the stuff that's really, really good. We don't do the crap stuff. So, yeah, Reacher is very good. Very surprisingly good. Enjoy it. Revel in it, because it'll probably be 2 more years till we get another one. For Dr. V and for everybody else here involved with the Xtreme Movie Show, thanks for listening, guys. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.